Deion Barnes is back in the fold. Penn State just got a class of 2025 commit. I mean, Penn State football and recruiting is just rolling right now.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. That is FanDuel.com/LockedOn. My name is Zach Seyko, your host, and feels like this is just a regular thing now. Wednesdays are for Penn State Wrestling Wednesdays, and the voice of Penn State Wrestling is back. Jeff Ironhead Byers on the other side. Jeff, it's always a privilege. Great to see you on the video component. Audio, I mean, you do a lot of radio, so this is good for our audio listeners as well. Thanks again for coming back on.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, Penn State Wrestling has done a lot. We're going to talk Penn State football first. I feel like that's a good opener for the middle and end here, as we're going to recap Iowa and then preview Ohio State in this 3-leg road trip that the wrestling team has. But a little bit of Penn State news. National Signing Day, the second one anyway, is today. They're expected to make some noise in recruiting. And we'll talk about the commit from the class of 2025. But more importantly, they got basically a recommit. Deion Barnes is sticking around for another season. That's the big news. The players love him. The coaching staff loves having him on. I feel like he's a young up-and-coming coach, and I really didn't want to see him go. But he's staying for at least another year as he moves from the graduate assistant position to now an analyst role, and he'll be able to help out in recruiting. From your perspective, from what you might know and just your opinion, what's your take on Deion Barnes sticking around for at least another year?
Yeah, I think it's significant on a couple of different fronts. One is, I think that he is a guy that has obviously a passion for Penn State and obviously for football. But I think, the fact that he is so close in age and relevance for the players that are in high school. I mean, I think he is a wonderful asset in terms of somebody that can connect with the kids as they come in and as they're being recruited, and can kind of give the overall perspective of the program, what it has to offer. And it feels to me, Zach, that this is just kind of building right now on the momentum that the program has. And I think that, you're seeing most, if not all, of the key components that can stick around here for what I think many are projecting now to be at least potentially a very special season next year. And this just feels like another good piece in that direction for the program. And I just think Barnes is, as you said, I think he's a guy that has a very bright future in the coaching ranks. And I think, again, he has, I think it's going to be good for him to be around this program for another year and to be able to learn from the coaching staff that James Franklin has put together and Franklin himself. But I think Penn State benefits big time here as well by having him around for another year and being able to tap into his expertise, both in terms of football knowledge and understanding, but really in just kind of that relationship building with the players that they're bringing in and that are still being recruited by the program.
Relatability. That's one way to sum it up, with especially the high school kids and young student athletes. They're young men, and he has, what I like is that he has that recent NFL experience. He played at Penn State. He played under Joe Paterno, and on top of that, he's a guy that is, as you mentioned, he's loyal to Penn State. I am all for coaches that believe that University Park is the place to be. This isn't a stepping stone for him. This is home if home wants him here. So I'm glad that he was able to get a pay increase. He was to get a little more of an all-encompassing role. and gets to do what he does best. And the analyst roles have changed. Nebraska got hit pretty hard because they had, well, you can't have too many coaches and analysts aren't considered coaches. So that's a violation. Now that they've changed those rules, sorry, Scott Frost. But Deion Barnes is able to get past those rules now and be really involved and still be more or less a coach, even though he is an analyst.
Yes.
And then speaking of recruiting, we said that he's going to have a big pack as a recruiting coordinator in addition to this analyst role. Penn State doesn't get a recruit for the class of 2023, not even the class of 2024, Jeff. They go all the way out to 2025, a sophomore in high school right now. And that is Jaelyne Matthews, a 4-star offensive tackle. I know that, Jeff, you're sifting through a lot of tape when it comes to Penn State wrestling. So we just know that he's a massive prospect. He's 6'6", listed at 290 pounds. He's one of the top offensive tackles in the country as a sophomore in that class of 2025. Penn State's getting a top 100 prospect, a top 5 player at his position, all the more important. Jeff, what does this tell you about Phil Trautwein and the job that he's done? Because I remember not too long ago, 2 years, if it was even that far out, maybe even just a little over a year ago, that people were calling for him to be fired.
Yeah, I think it's huge for him and it's huge for the program on a couple of different fronts. One is obviously offensive line is a constant need. And, Penn State, I think, finally broke through and got much needed improvement with that front this past season. But you're always looking to upgrade, and the offensive line is just an area that you just can never get enough top end prospects because, as we've talked about over the years, it's just by far the toughest position group to recruit because it's really hard to get guys that are going to be able to translate to the college level, because a lot of these guys are dominating at the high school level just because they're bigger and stronger than the other guys that they're facing. And then they get to the college level and you realize, oh my gosh, they don't have the footwork necessary, or they don't have the technique necessary to actually make this translate at the collegiate level against other big time talent. But I think, from all accounts, obviously this guy is having a terrific start to his scholastic career and projects very highly. But the other thing I think that this provides is one of those guys that you now can point to help in that recruiting process. And it's like, do you want to be part of a program that, does whatever Penn State does over the next couple of years? But do you also want to be, part of the next wave here, if you will? And this is a guy that you can point to and say, hey, this guy's going to be part of it.
Yeah.
You want to join in and be part of this as well. And I think, New Jersey obviously is always very fertile recruiting ground, and important recruiting ground for Penn State and really any of the big time schools. So I think this is a big get on a number of different fronts for Penn State and for Trautwein. And listen, I think just again, to me right now, you're just trying to keep everything heading in the right direction. And this just feels, again, like another piece of, oh yeah, man, Penn State has things popping and heading in the right direction across the board. And I think when you look at the stability right now, you look at the young stars that Penn State has, you look at the foundation that they're building within the program, and now you're looking at, the next few recruiting classes and the possibilities that are there. And again, it's hard to not have a good feeling about what is happening within the program right now.
It is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm Zach Seyko, your host, with special guest, the voice of Penn State wrestling, Jeff Ironhead Byers. We're talking some wrestling next, coming up after this. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and we're really excited for our new sports betting partner of Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that is even better. They have so many great features that make sports betting easy and fun. New customers join today and get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed, when all you got to do is place your first $5 bet. So all you got to do is go up and sign up on fanduel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads and player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a bigger payout with the same game parlay, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So football fans, do not miss out. Place your first $5 bet and you get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at fanduel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm Zach Seyko with special guest, the voice of Penn State wrestling, Jeff Ironhead Byers. And before we move on, Jeff, Locked On is heading to the Senior Bowl. Get inside analysis from the hosts that covered the NFL's next generation in college and find out which NFL draft boards these players will be climbing, all in one location. All you got to do is subscribe to Locked On NFL Draft for nightly live shows from the Senior Bowl on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. That is Locked On NFL Draft. Penn State wrestling gets I can't call it really a much needed, but just a reassuring victory. This is a team that is going to finish undefeated. They're going to finish number 1 overall, and then it's just a matter of wrestling their way through the Big Ten tournament and then ultimately the NCAA championships out in Tulsa. And it's a matter of how many wrestlers they're going to get on the podium. Obviously, one of the bigger storylines is that Levi Haynes, his red shirt is completely gone. I say that they definitely needed him for this one. And I will explain why. But Jeff, you're the wrestling expert, so I want your opinion on this. A 23-14 victory. Roman Bravo Young comes to mind, Aaron Brooks, Max Dean, Haynes himself. In your opinion, because you saw it firsthand and called it live on the radio, who had the most important bout? Who had the most important victory? Who had the best performance? However you want to split that.
Yeah, I think for me, there are two guys that jump out. And listen, I think all 6 wins were important and big in different ways. Obviously, Roman getting a pin was really big at the time of that dual meet. And I think, given what happened over the next couple of bouts, was even more critical that he got those extra 3 points on the board for Penn State heading into the second half of the dual meet. But to be honest with you, for me, Greg Kirkfleet was really the most important, because even though he had that win over Tony Cassiope at the All-Star meet that doesn't officially count on either's record, but obviously everybody knows that it occurred. But I think coming off the loss to Mason Paris, and Cassiope has been a thorn in his side the last couple of seasons. And Cassiope has been a guy that has come up really big, really consistently for Iowa in these dual meets, and obviously was undefeated on the season. And I thought that was just a really big kind of bounce back bout. I mean, I know he had a bout in between there as well between Paris and Cassiope, but to me, Kirkfleet just looked good. It really never felt like Cassiope was threatening to win that bout. And that's really the first time. I mean, even the All-Star meet, Cassiope felt like he was coming on there at the end. And this one, I just thought Kirkfleet really controlled it from the outset. And it just was a really good, solid victory. Again, it was a big win for Haynes just because of, again, the momentum that Iowa had and the fact that, the red shirt was pulled, and we've seen, Penn State before pull a red shirt with Mark Hall, and the result against Iowa didn't go as well in that first time out. So I do think that was really big for Levi Haynes to get a taste of, that atmosphere and that caliber of competition with all of the pressure on him. But Kirkfleet to me was, I realized the duel was basically in hand at that point. I really liked the way he came out and competed.
Yeah, I have to piggyback off of Levi Haynes winning 3-2 against another ranked wrestler, but you talked about Iowa's momentum. Iowa was going to win. If Haynes had lost that, Iowa would have hypothetically won 4 matches in a row. And then if you swing that point total around, which is something that I brought up already, is that you subtract 3 from Penn State, and you add 3 to Iowa, assuming that Levi Haynes loses that, and it's a 3-point decision in favor of Iowa. That's a 6-point swing. And now this is a tied dual meet between Kirkfleet and Cassiope. And now tensions are really high. Things are a lot different. Penn State's wrestling from behind late as opposed to leading with, getting Max Dean to ice the match, essentially. Because technically, Kirkfleet, if he had given up a pin, I wasn't expecting that, but it would have made things obviously very interesting, and Iowa would have won. Kirkfleet dominated, as you mentioned. I just think, with all the hypotheticals, if Haynes doesn't get that win and breaks up the losing streak that Penn State had in the middle weights there, things could have gone off the rails there, and Iowa would have pulled off quite the upset. I don't know that people think about that enough at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it was a critical bout at a critical time of the dual meet. And, I think Levi's a better wrestler than Seabrook. And I think if they meet again in the postseason, I expect that margin will widen a little bit. But it was, it's one thing to be better. It's another to produce when you need to produce. And, for a true freshman at the college level, that is not an easy task against an Iowa team that was very difficult to score on, and finding a way to get the takedown was absolutely huge for Levi Haynes. And again, I think sets him up well right now for a really good stretch run. And I think he and the other freshmen are the guys that you're looking to just kind of make those jumps here in levels between now and March, and try to really get into the mix for high All-America honors anyway.
What did you make of 174? Carter Starace, not the most resounding win. I guess I'm just, we're just all kind of spoiled as Penn State wrestling fans. Yep. And Carter Starace usually wins that meet, that matchup 12-1 instead of 2-1 here. Nelson Brands is ranked 16th, so he's not a slouch, but I feel like there's such a gap between Carter and just 2, 3, and 4 at 174. So is it just a matter of an off night? Did Nelson Brands really give it his all? What's your takeaway from that one?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I do think Brands wrestled a very smart tactical match against Carter. I also think Carter, that ride in the third period was impressive stuff. I mean, I don't think that should be underrated. It was kind of it reminded me of Roman and Ragusin the week before, where Roman just rode out the third period in that case, and it was closer than people were expecting. But I think there's a little bit of a statement you can make in a close match when you can get that minute of riding time and take care of business in the third period when you need to. But I thought Nelson, I think Carter learned some things from that bout, and I expect if they meet again, Carter will be able to do a little better job of setting up his shots and then capitalizing. But I think a lot of it had to do with Nelson just being really well prepared. I mean, Iowa has a great coaching staff, and Brands obviously has been around wrestling all of his life, and knows what he's doing. I don't think it was the sharpest that Carter's ever looked, but I also I give a lot of credit to Brands and Iowa. That being said, I never, as I'm watching the bout, and I mean, I know it's close, and wrestling's a sport where you make one mistake and it can be really costly. It just never had the feel to me of about where Carter was really in danger of losing the match to Brands. But again, I give Nelson a lot of credit. I think Carter will be just fine, and I know he's looking forward to avenging one of his collegiate losses this coming weekend. Yeah. When Penn State is at Indiana on Sunday.
Yeah, and the final thought from the dual meet against Iowa, again, Penn State beating Iowa 23-14, number 1 versus number 2, and we have the voice of Penn State wrestling on here, unlocked on Nittany Lions. That is Jeff Ironhead Byers. Jeff, at 125 pounds, basically everyone on the planet thought that Spencer Lee was going to walk away with a pin. He came away with a tech fall, which is still 5 points, but just what? And there was a switch. Marco Vespa was inserted into the lineup as opposed to Gary Steen. So was this a little bit of strategy on the part of Cale Sanderson saying that Vespa was just better at staying off his back than a Gary Steen? Because that's where I think the momentum started for Penn State. I know Roman Bravo Young, RBOI's pin, that really gets the crowd going. But again, when the entire universe thinks that Spencer Lee is going to get 6 points there and he doesn't, again, what did Vespa do in that moment that at least prevented him? And he had him in a cradle too. He also started Spencer Lee off with a nice cradle before Lee ultimately won 18.
Yeah, I think that I think the reason Vespa was there was just because of his length, and it's something that obviously Spencer Lee had not, you presume anyway, was not scouting Vespa, and so it was just I think just a little switch up. Hey, let's see if we can catch Iowa by surprise. Not not that Vespa's top end talent, but he does have some explosiveness to him, as you saw, and I think with his length, what they got exactly what they were hoping for. Penn State did, in terms of, hey, if you can hit that cradle and you can keep that baby locked up, who knows? Maybe you have the win of the decade here in terms of an upset in college wrestling. But I think it's interesting because Vespa's been ahead in a lot of his bouts, and then he actually I think is now 0-6 or 0-7 in his career, and he's been pinned 4 times. So you look at it on paper, and it's like, well, what are you doing? You're going against a guy that's on a pinning streak, and this is a guy that gets pinned. But he's been ahead in those bouts, and again, I think there was just a feeling that, listen, he'll go out and at least provide that explosiveness early, and hopefully stay off of his back throughout that first period, which is exactly what he did. I was surprised that Lee, I know he went for that armbar a couple of times and it was stopped with the, potentially dangerous. And Lee was, it was properly stopped. I went back and looked at it, and you can't move up, on the above the shoulder blade there. And so I think Lee kind of gave up a little more quickly than I would have expected in terms of trying to get the pin. But I also think part of it was Lee just wanted to get off the mat after that cradle attempt by Vespa. Didn't want to tempt fate. And once he got realized that he could roll him, over, that hey, let's just take the tech fall and get out of here and go back to work. So I think ultimately it probably worked out pretty well for both teams. At the end of the day, Iowa got the 5 points, but Penn State prevented the 6. And again, Marco gave the crowd its first energetic jolt of the night.
Yeah, definitely. It is Locked On Nittany Lions with special guest Jeff Ironhead Byers, the voice of Penn State wrestling. And Jeff's going to be on the road at someone who shouldn't be overlooked, Columbus, Ohio. The Buckeyes are number 5 in the country. When it comes to dual meets, we're going to preview Penn State versus Ohio State and this 3-leg road trip that the Nittany Lions have after beating Iowa. It's coming up next. Welcome back to Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko. Final segment with Jeff Ironhead Byers, the voice of Penn State wrestling. It's a Wrestling Wednesday when this episode's going up, and Penn State's now going to go on the road. They've had 2 tough dual meet victories. They beat number 3 Michigan, number 2 Iowa, now number 5 Ohio State. So it's not that this gets any easier. They do get a little bit of a breather down the stretch, don't get me wrong, but we're going to talk about all of that here as they got Ohio State, at Indiana, and at Rutgers as well on this 3-match road stand, I should say here. But Ohio State's definitely the toughest of them all because you're going to get ranked matchups up and down the board except at 174. In Ohio State, it's going to be a sellout crowd. And Penn State's got to travel again after being pretty comfy and cozy at home in either of Rec Hall or the Bryce Jordan Center now. So Ohio State's definitely going to be up for this match. But I still like Penn State to win handedly. Jeff, when you look at the 10 matchups, which one are you most excited for?
Yeah, I think there's a couple that are really intriguing to me. I really think Ohio State is a team that could surprise some people and make some noise in the postseason tournaments. I think it is a really talented lineup. They're just now getting healthy, and I think they have a lot of belief in themselves, and they're kind of like Penn State in that they have a lot of good veteran presence with guys that have accomplished a lot already in their careers, but they really have an infusion of young talent that, the future is very bright because of some of the guys that are hitting the mat for the first time this season. I think the bout that I'm probably most excited to see is Harshla and Facundo, because both of these guys are really dangerous. I've been talking about it all year, but at 165 to me, and 149 would not be far behind, but 165 is just such a loaded weight class, both nationally and in the Big Ten. I think there are legitimately 6 or 7 guys that could win the title at the Big Ten championships.
Yeah,
and I
that's
think
fair.
there's probably as many as 10 that I think are in legitimate contention to win the national title this year. And usually, you have 2 or 3 guys that you're like, okay, well, these guys are the guys that are at the, you either have like Spencer Lee is the guy, and then you have a couple of guys, or you have a weight class where you might have 2 or 3, and then there's a drop off, or 3 or 4 and a drop off. 165 to me, it's just a really fascinating weight class. And I think both there and 149 are just going to be a heck of a lot of fun. But 165 in the Big Ten especially is just a really deep weight class. And I think probably 157 and 165 are the two that I think are going to be a lot of fun for fans to watch and check out. And again, for Penn State, it's all about getting these freshmen more experience and hopefully get some wins and some more confidence as you make the turn toward the postseason here.
I know you bring 165 is definitely one that I have circled because I want to see Alex Facundo continue to push into that national spotlight, because he finally got there, and then he ultimately drops a tough one against his Iowa counterpart, and now he's got that chance to follow it up on the road. And obviously 184 is very enticing. I feel like Caleb Romero's been there for quite some time now. I feel like people probably say that about Aaron Brooks, but you're getting a top 5 matchup and potentially a Big Ten and maybe even an NCAA championship bout. You're definitely getting that, I think, when it comes to the Big Ten. We'll see about the true finals out in Tulsa. But what kind of implications can that have with Brooks, who's looked I think he's, obviously the clear-cut number 1, but sometimes we have seen him be vulnerable.
Yeah, I think he's made some adjustments to what the way he's training and the way he's preparing since the loss down at New Orleans. And I'm really impressed with what Aaron Brooks is doing right now.
Yeah.
Just was up in the room for a little bit earlier this week, and watching him, he was rolling around with Alex Facundo and just going over some things, along with the coaching staff going over some things with him. And I just think he's in a really good place right now. And you're right, Romero is really good. I certainly don't take anything for granted. I just think right now, Aaron Brooks is getting himself back into that level where it's him, and then there's a drop off, and then there's everybody else. Now, again, that being said, obviously any given day, anything can happen. And there's nobody out there, Spencer Lee included, that's unbeatable. You saw that if Espa keeps that cradle tight, who knows? So, wrestling's a sport that can humble you very, very quickly. But I really like the way Aaron Brooks is wrestling right now. All the respect in the world. Romero is, as good as it gets outside of Aaron Brooks in the Big Ten. And I do think that'll be a really good test. And listen, 157 again. Levi Haynes keeps coming up big. Patty Gallagher is no slouch, and Haynes knows that. They met. I think it was the Edinburgh Open last year, and Haynes needed a late takedown to win the Open title over Gallagher. So, I mean, these two know each other and they know what to expect. And this will be, again, another big test for Haynes as well.
Jeff Byers, the voice of Penn State Wrestling, is here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And Jeff, you're going to be on the road on Friday. You're going to be on the road on Sunday as well. And then another road match when they go up to Piscataway when they take on Rutgers. So that is later on. But in Columbus and then Indiana. Most importantly, it's a 3-leg road trip here, right? Back to back to back to back. Before you get Maryland and ultimately Clarion, who are some a little more lackluster opponents, to put it lightly, to finish the season before the Big Ten tournament, where all the individuals take place, and then the NCAA championships. Penn State, what do you believe is Penn State's biggest challenge to remain focused when they have to go on the road like this 3 times?
Yeah, I think, truthfully, Zach, these road meets have been under Cal Sanderson and even before Cal came in. They're neat opportunities for the team to really bond and come together. And I think, we've seen that over the years. These guys are a close-knit group. They, hang out. They'll just hang out in their rooms or, if there's a movie theater or something close by, they may go do that. But it's really an opportunity just for the relationships to get stronger within the team. The arenas are going to be, I think Ohio State will have a great crowd. I think Indiana actually should have a good crowd. That Indiana team is, it's one of the better teams they've had in the last couple of decades. And Rutgers obviously is going to draw well, especially with Penn State coming out there. So, I think the atmosphere, but you've come to expect that if you're wrestling at Penn State, you're going to get good crowds that are into it when you're competing. So I think that part's all good. And I think there are some really good individual matchups here in all of the remaining dual meets, Maryland and Clarion included. So, team-wise, you're certainly expecting Penn State to win these. I do think Ohio State, the whole, is there a path to victory? Yeah, it's a pretty unlikely path for the Buckeyes, but I think that's the one team remaining on the schedule that, you could draw up a scenario that's not all that far-fetched where Ohio State wins the dual meet. But I think really for Penn State right now, it's more about, this final month of the season. Let's make the improvements and get each guy as close to being on top of their game as you can when March rolls around. And, if there's one thing that Cal Sanderson and the staff have done well, and they've done a lot well, but the biggest thing is that they do get these guys peaking and wrestling their best in those postseason tournaments, and especially, obviously, at the NCAA championships. And it certainly feels to me right now like this team is heading in that same path. I really like the fact that they had that Iowa duel last week and the Michigan duel the previous week, just to get a feel for those guys and to be able to go back and, wins and losses with the individuals. Let's go back, look at what was working, what isn't working, the areas we need to improve on. There are some guys that have got to get better off of the bottom, and, there's some technique things, there's some mindset things that they can work on. And, you still have a little over a month to be able to work on all of that stuff. And that's important because you have the kids now seeing firsthand, all right, yep, I absolutely do have to work on this if I want to get to where I want to be. And, all of these guys in the Penn State lineup have All-American or national championship aspirations. And, they've got some work to do to get there when March rolls around, but they have some time to work with here.
Special guest Jeff Ironhead Byers joining the show once again to talk some Penn State wrestling. You are on the road, Jeff. Safe travels for this upcoming Friday here, and Sunday at Ohio State and at Indiana. Of course, you can listen to the local radio stations if you're in the State College, Pennsylvania area. If you are out and about or if you're out of the area, Go PSU Sports is the place to get it. And of course, you can see it on the screen if you're watching, but at Penn State Wrestling on Twitter, Penn State and then WREST Rest, Penn State Rest on Twitter. So Jeff, thanks so much for the time again. Excited to have our next conversation. It'll most likely be previewing those Big Ten championships where Penn State will look to reclaim that crown that they came in second. They came up short a year ago. So it'll be fun to chat next time.
Thanks very much, Zach. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Make sure you check out the brand new podcast of Locked On, and that is Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. You get to hear from big name experts, insiders, players, and coaches all in one spot. That is Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I appreciate the support for Locked On Nittany Lions on the YouTube channel. Go follow us on Twitter at Locked On Nittany, and you can see it up on the screen. But if you're listening, at Zach_Seyko, appreciate the follow over on Twitter. More Penn State football content, men's basketball, and wrestling to come here on Locked On Nittany Lions. So stay tuned for all of that.